let's get some more analysis. John Kehoe joins me. He's economics editor at the Australian Financial Review. Quite the stuff up for Anthony Albanese, wasn't it, to kick off the campaign?
Yeah, not a good start on the first full day of the campaign, is it, Kieran? When you're vying to be the Prime Minister of the country and you're asked what the unemployment rate is or the interest rate of the Reserve Bank, you're expected to know that. And particularly for Labor, not a good start in the sense that in the polls, they always start behind in terms of who's trusted to manage the economy. Now, the risk for Labor is this now plays into that narrative that the government's trying to create. You can't trust Labor on the economy, that Anthony Albanese hasn't held a key economic portfolio even when he's been in government. Of course, he argues, I've been the infrastructure minister, but the infrastructure minister doesn't sort of have to be across the unemployment rate and the RBA cash rate and the inflation rate and those sort of things. So he should have been better prepared.
And they do have cheat sheets, don't they? We discussed this at the time that Andrew Clennell asked the Prime Minister about the cost of living question. And for years, we've seen leaders show up with cheat sheets from the interest rate, inflation, job figure, but really unemployment, you shouldn't need the cheat sheet at 4%.
Well, John Kehoe was always well briefed on the key economic metrics. I think he used to keep a little note in his wallet that was constantly updated by his economic advisors when that economic data changed. But, you know, Labor's made a big
Josh Frydenberg walks around with one now.
Yeah.
You see it at the front of his folder when you interview him.
Yeah, and I'm sure Jim Chalmers, to be fair, would know these key rates as well. But Labor's trying to make a big deal about if jobs was a key test going into this election, well, you'd expect to know the unemployment rate as well. So I think he can recover from this, Anthony Albanese, but it's certainly a bit of an interruption to when he would have wanted to get off to a better start on the first full day of the campaign.
And I think internally as well, they're probably saying, well, I know they are saying, I've had these doubts raised with me. Has the work been done? And are they getting him tuned up well enough before facing the media on this campaign, whether it be with the questions being put to him, the wargaming that's done? Because, to be honest, day one, this sort of stuff you should know that journalists are going to come at you with from the get-go.
Yeah, it sets the tone. And look, there's a view that Albanese hasn't been tested fully by the journalist press pack over the last 3 years, that he sometimes does have a little bit of a glass jaw. Now, come the election campaign, the journalists, they're going to be going hard on either side. They're there to get stories. They're there to test the potential future Prime Minister as well. So it is a different level during an election campaign, day in, day out for those 41 days. And it does become a little bit potentially combative with the press pack as well. So you've got to really be match hardened and match fit. And the Prime Minister's been used to that for the last 3 years. Maybe Albanese hasn't as much.
And John, the other thing to throw in here, because you spoke about the fact that in terms of where Labor fits in those polling numbers with the government, the coalition, when it comes to economic management, it's also right in the middle of what the government is trying to build as part of its message, that you can't trust this guy to run the show, particularly with the precarious economic outlook.
Yeah, I mean, the government's trying to run on its economic agenda, basically, even though it doesn't really have a big picture policy to go forward. It's basically running on the legacy of its handling of the pandemic, being able to get unemployment down to 4%. It could even be below 4% come this week, come Thursday. Commonwealth Bank economists are among those tipping the unemployment rate to drop to 3.9% when that jobs report prints this week as well. And if that happens, the government will be able to sell that message to the electorate. They say it was going to happen later in the year, but it might even happen sooner.
And when you've got someone like Katie Gallagher with him at the news conference, the finance spokesperson, I guess that's part of the reason they have those sorts of individuals there to pick up the slack when there are difficult questions. I put that earlier to Simon Banks from Hawker Britton, a former Labor advisor. Maybe he should have just diverted to Katie Gallagher because she'd know the answer.
Yeah.
And his point was, I think it's a fair one. He said leaders need to know those basic ones.
Yeah.
And if you offloaded it, it would have been a bad look anyway.
It was an awkward one for Katie because I think later on she was then asked if she knew, and as the shadow finance person, she did. She knew the figures, but also I don't think she wanted to upstage her leader too much either. So she was in a bit of an invidious position, wasn't she?
You do say, though, that you point out it's not necessarily a death blow because it's, we've got 6 weeks to go.
Yeah, and they're probably lucky it's happened earlier rather than later in the campaign. I sort of compare it to Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton back in the 2016 election when I was in Washington, and a lot of the bad stuff about Trump, some of the videotape and stuff that he'd said about women, unsavoury stuff, came out quite a long time before the election, and he had time to recover. Whereas James Comey, the FBI director, reopened the case into Hillary Clinton only 10 days before the election, and that really sucked all the momentum from her late in the campaign. So I think on balance, it's better this sort of thing happens earlier rather than right on the eve of the election poll day.
And there is the other thing that we should mention, this approach that Labor's tried to turn or make lemonade out of a lemon, basically just saying that at least I'm fronting up, I'm honest, I'm sorry, I stuffed up, and how about the other bloke that does the same when he makes mistakes?
I thought it was a good recovery from Albanese in the sense of salvaging the best from a bad situation. He basically said, look, I'm an honest guy, I'm going to say when I stuff up, unlike Scott Morrison, who's not prepared to say sorry or admit to his mistakes. So he made it the best out of a bad situation, but at the end of the day, what's going to run on the news bulletins tonight
is the gaffe,
and him stuffing up on that and him getting it wrong.
And they've got that video for the rest of the campaign.
They do. And I think I saw a Young Liberal ad, it's already being played on your station as well, so that we saw come out in the last hour or so too. So they're already on top of it, the Liberals.
John Kehoe, Economics Editor at the AFR. Thanks, as always.
Thanks, KG.